Welcome back to another episode of the Bear Trap, a Bears podcast by a Bears fan. I'm your host, Terry, and today is finally here, day before the game, going to do my predictions and all types of good stuff as we get ready to kick off the 2019 season. Before we get started, definitely want to say we're all Bears fans. Let's agree and disagree respectfully. Start the Patreon campaign, and especially as this season's about to start. If you want video review, we're gonna need to pull together some money to get the NFL Game Pass. But again, you listening is support enough. So go to the Patreon page and, go ahead and consider if you want to support financially. Anyway, with that being said, today we're going to talk about kind of the number one question on both sides of the ball going into the season. I'm going to talk about predicting the MVPs for both sides of the ball. Then we're going to talk about the schedule and kind of what I'm thinking for record wise. So, that's how we'll kind of run it down. But I won't go through every game like I did last year. Look, I was listening to it and I try every possible angle to let people know I did not want to do this. And I didn't enjoy it. And I don't want to do it again. It's too many variables. Like picking these games are ridiculous. And so I'm not going to do that. I will do a record and then I'll talk about some key games to look for. But I'm not going to go a game by game prediction because it's not fun. It's useless. So anyway, with that being said, let's start off with my number one question for the offense. And I think this might be a lot of people's number one question. And that is, will Trubisky increase his passing stats, for lack of a better term, because I don't live and die by stats, but for lack of a better term, yes, his stats. Are we going to see an uptick in his touchdown output? And really, I guess that's what we're talking about. Is he going to be more prolific in the passing game than he was last year? And that isn't all on Mitch Trubisky, but a lot of it does fall on him, because when we're talking about offensively, at least for me, one of the big things is, can we take our passing game to the next level? That could be the question. But specifically, if we're going to get to the next level, of course, it's got to be a discussion about Mitch Trubisky. So two and one touchdown interception ratio last year, 24 touchdowns. Not bad. 3,200 yards. Not bad. And again, we're talking about 14 games. But even if you, again, extrapolate the trend, not crazy numbers. And so to me, and I think I mentioned this before, does it mean that we have to hit certain numbers in order to win or be effective? No. Of course, obviously, we won a lot even with those numbers. To me, it's more about the threat and what defenses and opposing teams have to plan for. And so with a really strong running game last year and a big question mark this year as far as how we're going to look in the run game, in a so-so passing game, that is going to have to, come into consideration when we go into these weeks after week, grinded out situations. Will we get teams in a place where they're like, okay, now we need to account a little more attention to this passing game than we did before? Because last year, I would say we were good enough to win games. And that's what the design is. The design hasn't changed. We're a top flight defensive team with an offense that just has to play good enough. Just like you saw in the playoffs in Philly. We got to be good enough to be there at the end. And so when our defense doesn't make the stop that it needs to, our offense has to be good enough to get the football to field goal position. That's kind of the balance that we are in. And so I'm by no means saying that we need to become like, one of the most feared offenses, but I do think our output needs to be a little higher in order for us to be where we want. Defensively, number one question on defense, which was the same question it was last year, but I guess it's a little different now. The question is, will Leonard Floyd produce? And so last year, it was like, okay, what will Leonard Floyd do with Mac on the opposite side? Now we know that answer. Not a whole bunch. And so now the question is, will he up his game? And so we know what Mac brings. We know what the defense brings, all that good stuff. We know kind of what Leonard Floyd is. And people want to bounce back and forth about the numbers. People want to bounce back and forth about his hand injury, which is funny that he's injured, but Trey Burton's not injured. Anyway, so people want to bounce back and forth in those conversations. And to me, it's never been about the numbers. I've talked about Leonard Floyd many a times, and it's really watching him as a pass rusher, in my opinion, as a defensive line coach. He just has not put it together. And so that's really what I'm looking for. Honestly, there's a world where Leonard Floyd has no sacks this year, and I think he's better than he was last year. For a lot of fans, they can't comprehend that. But for me, I can, because, of course, you got pressures and all these other fringe stats that they got now. But mostly, you can affect the game without making the sacks. And that's by your ability to get off blocks, to shed blocks, to push the pocket, to do all those things. And he has not had that yet. I've went through every sack. So if you want to go debate, you could go watch that, because I've already broken down what I saw. There's a lot of things that helps him get sacks, and a lot of players on our team outside of Khalil Mack that help them get sacks. But I think to take it to the level where he's truly a pass rushing force, not a pass rushing stat stuffer, but he's a force where, one-on-one, you're going up against him, you're going to have to take some extra steps back to give yourself some space, or you're going to have to get some help, because you know that if you put a one-on-one block, he's more than likely going to defeat it. He's not at that point, and that's what I want to see, if he can get up to that point, because he's going to get the one-on-one blocks, because they're not going to Khalil Mack. They'll be going to Leonard Floyd. And so, again, in a low or medium pressure situation. Last year was low pressure. This year, everybody's got their eye on him, but at the same time, offenses have their eye on Khalil Mack and Akeem Hicks. So again, medium pressure situation, I want to see him take his game up, especially as we get toward that contract year. All right, so those are my main questions for the offense and the defense. As far as talking about our MVPs, this might be a little boring, but I'd be interested to hear everybody else's answer. Offense, last year I said Trey Burton, and I still stand by the logic behind that, especially even more so after watching what happened, because in the season recap, I don't even know if I had an MVP, because who was our offense MVP last year? Can we really honestly say anybody was an MVP? I mean, if you just want to say who had more stats than the other, we can do that. But Jordan Howard wasn't a bell cow till later. Allen Robinson missed some games, and even with that, the ball was spread around pretty evenly between everybody. Offensive line-wise, we were good. No one was absolutely great, as evidenced by the fact that we kept playing different people to replace Kyle Long, and we're now switching center and guard. So it's like, and then Trubisky's numbers weren't crazy. So it's like, who would you say was MVP? Similar to that this year, I don't know that I see somebody be MVP. And again, I've said it many times, I prefer it that way. I prefer that we don't have a Julio. Well, okay. It used to be Julio Jones where he just got the ball. It used to be AB where he just got the ball, but now they end up getting running mates. But you know what I mean. I prefer where we don't have a predictable guy that we're force feeding. And so with the running back situation, look, Tariq Cohen is going to get his in different ways. So that leaves the question of David Montgomery. Now, he could be in position, but I don't think Nagy would ever be a play caller that just has one cowbell running back. And so even if he got to the point where he's getting the most carries, Right now, he's behind Mike Davis, and so there's that. And then you got Tariq Cohen, who's going to get his, so there's that. So I don't see it there. Receiving wise, I just don't ever see Allen Robinson again being like number one to the point where we got to get the ball to him. And even if he upped his game this year, that's just going to make it easier to get the ball to Anthony Miller, Taylor Gabriel, and Trey Burton. So I just don't see our receiving core, anybody with that. Offensive line wise, it's too hard to be an MVP unless you're a left tackle. So my answer is Mitch Trubisky. All that to say, I think the MVP is going to have to be Mitch Trubisky with the way our offense is set up. But I also think that's who it's going to be, because you tell me the player you think that steps up to a top level and is going, or steps up to a higher level and is going to lead the team more than Trubisky. I don't think there's an answer there. So I think Mitch Trubisky is going to have to be, and I think he will be our MVP offensively. Defensively, this answer might be even more boring. Khalil Mack. And you know what is interesting? There's a conversation we could have here, because some people would say Eddie Jackson. Here's the thing. I get Eddie's skill set and I get what he did last year, but he's not what Earl Thomas was schematically. I think some people was like, people love to throw that term out there. He's just a center fielder. That's not all Eddie did. We didn't run a ton of cover 3. We ran some cover 1, but we didn't run a ton of cover 3. We mostly ran quarters and some cover 2. And so a lot of times it was 2 safeties. Now, we don't know what Pagano's going to do, but just saying from last year. And so skill set wise, absolutely, Eddie Jackson has it. Schematically is not what Seattle was. Seattle was different, where most of the time, 9 times out of 10, they was running some form of cover 3. And if you're doing that, you're going to need a center fielder. And so that made him more valuable as a player. When people were talking about that Legion of Boom, I don't think Eddie's that same value because of the scheme, especially now that we got Ha Clinton Dix. It's even more different because now you got another guy that can play center field. And so it just depends on what Pagano ends up running. Like, I think our fronts and stuff are going to look the same. I don't know that our coverage and our blitz habits are going to be the same. So we just got to wait and see. So there's an argument to be made for Eddie, but we're not talking about best player. We're talking about MVP player. And so Akeem Hicks, you could talk about how good he is, what he frees up. You could talk about even Kyle Fuller, because that's the thing. Kyle Fuller's year had nothing to do with Eddie Jackson. Kyle Fuller would have did what he did without Eddie Jackson. I mean, of course, assignment football and everything, but Kyle was able to do that off his play alone. And I think our secondary is really, 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 or was really, really good. I don't know what it's going to be this year. I think it'll be great. Good. I don't know if it'll be great. But I think last year we were great. And it's evidenced by when I went through all our sacks and I showed you just how much the coverage was on point. And so I don't think Eddie made Kyle Fuller. I don't think Kyle Fuller made Eddie. I don't think Prince made Kyle. I think they all just worked well together. And Akeem Hicks, again, a force in the middle. Even Roquan and Trevathan tag teaming in the coverage and what they add a lot. The one person I think that affects everybody and has the skill set to affect everybody every play is Khalil Mack. So I don't expect that to change. So 2 boring answers, but that's what it is. All right, so let's talk about our schedule. Do I like our schedule last year better? Yes, a lot better. This is a tougher schedule, not only based off the divisions we're playing, but also based on the fact of our our kind of one-off games that they give us. So, we got the NFC East, which it's on paper it's not looking great this year, but they're tough players and a lot of good young players, and I don't sleep on any of them. So for me, I couldn't throw them out there. And then again, with all the kind of different teams that we'll be playing, because Kansas City's one of them, whatever. But I won't get into it. I'm gonna talk about the key games, because for me, I have us at 11-5 just off the cuff. But as I said before, that it's really tough to do that. There's so much that can change and that can happen. I'm not gonna, hold anybody. And this is all just fun predictions. I'm not gonna hold fast to anybody that does that right now, because you just don't know how it's gonna shake out. But 11-5, I think, is my confident answer. There's a lot of games where it's so tough to pick, where it's like, man, that's a coin flip. I don't know. There's a lot of questions. So I'm going to go 11-5. So we got the AFC West. That's who we got. We got so many, I'm looking at the schedule. I'm like, wait, which teams is which? So we got the AFC West and we got the NFC East. So our kind of off games would be the LA Rams and the Saints, which, two of the best NFC teams. So there you go right there. So anyway, what are some key games? I'm actually not going to pick week one. I mean, because even with week one, we made a statement, but even with, how the game turned out, I don't think it derailed our season. I don't think week one derails anyone's season. I know there's the stat about going 2-0 or 0-2 in playoffs, but I'm not too worried about all that. For me, our first key game comes in week 7, the Saints after the bye week. That's going to be a good test. That's right around the midway point. Going to be a good test to see how we bounce back after a week off. We'll be coming from Oakland, having a bye week. Then we'll have a home game. So we should be set up for success. Extra week of rest, a home game. But you're talking about one of the biggest challenges in the NFC. And so that's going to be a pivotal game for me too. And really, the 3 in a row are pivotal. You got the Los Angeles Chargers, and we're at home again. But, man, that's one of the most loaded teams. Now, I don't think Derwin James is going to be back by then, so that does change it a lot. But they are a loaded team still. A lot of talent, even without Melvin Gordon. You're coming off the Saints, which I think is going to be a lot of running, a lot of running for the defense. Even though we're at home, Soldier Field, they're not going to, tear it up like a dome. But it's going to be a lot of running. And then you're going to have to turn around and go against a team that got weapons and can play Smash Mouth. So that's going to be big. Then you got the Eagles for obvious reasons, the rematch. But also, again, one of the top contenders in the NFC. And that strength of schedule record is going to really play important. And so you'll be at Philly, coming off 2 really big games. That's going to be a gut check time. If you're talking about a 3-0 stretch in that, week 7 to week 9, I don't see any reason that we're not one of the top seeds in the NFC, to be honest. So those 3 are my really big pivotal games. And then, of course, I don't really want to say divisional games because that's obvious, I think. Those always have big implications. And so I don't really want to throw that one out there. Dallas is on my radar, but we're coming off 2 Thursday games, so we'll have a full week's rest. It'll be at home. And I think we match up well with Dallas. If they want to run the ball, let them run the ball. I don't think you're going to beat us that way. And then Kansas City. Kansas City will be, I think, by that point in the season, that's really going to determine if we play week 17 or not. And so I think that's when we'll be playing for first round bye type stuff. And I think that game will end up being important too, if we're both still having to play at that time. But either way, that'd be a good test against the AFC and Pat Mahomes. I think outside of Aaron Rodgers, we need to see that type of quarterback test. Guy that's mobile, that can extend the play, that can push the ball down the field. Tyreek Hill, if he's playing with his speed, that's really a good test, I think, to see, again, how we handle a high-flying offense. Not to say the Saints aren't, but I think Mahomes is very different than Drew Brees. And so I think that'll be a key game too. And so, again, divisional is so like, what divisional game isn't important? So it's hard for me to say that, pick any of these that's like, oh, this one's more important. Of course, the last week it could come down to that, but I think for me, that's where I'm looking at those key games. And then if we're talking about a trap game, I go back to Oakland. It's away. I don't know. Something about Oakland. I don't think they're particularly really talented. But again, that's what we're talking about, trap games. That's the one I would have my eye on. I think about Washington because they got a great defense, but I just don't believe Haskins is going to beat us. So I think my trap game, I'm looking at Oakland. But all in all, we got a tough schedule. We got to handle the business that we're supposed to. And the thing about being a team of our caliber, a lot of our schedule is games that we're supposed to win. And so I think if we do that, if we handle 2 of the 3 games in that stretch between week 7 and week 9, I think we'll be in good shape. All right, so that's it from me, man. I'm ready to start the season. As I said before, I'll be downtown at Grant Park at the event. I'll be right around the game, and I'm excited. I'm excited. Football is back. But most importantly, I want to hear from you. Go to the comment section. Let me know what you think about all those different topics. What are you predicting for us this season? Share it around. Get the conversation started. Let's get some more Better Bears fans in here. Thumbs up, subscribe, check out the Patreon, and remember, stay up and bear down.